Next, Laura.
Sean, thanks so much. And welcome to The Angle. News breaking on multiple fronts. You will not want to miss a single minute of this show tonight. Al Franken's career on the ropes as a tsunami of Democratic senators are now demanding that he step down. And a bold and historic move by the president, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing it as the capital of the Jewish state, sparking vows of violent protest across the Muslim world. We're going to talk about it in a rare interview with former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. Don't miss this. And you'll want to stay to the end of the show tonight, where I'll deliver a special message on Time Magazine's farcical Person of the Year choice. But first, the desperate political warfare of the left. That's the focus of tonight's Angle. I'm going to explain to you what's really behind all these calls on Capitol Hill suddenly for Al Franken to resign from the Senate. At last count, 34 Democratic senators, look at them all there, are demanding that Franken step down in the wake of a string of harassment allegations that we've been hearing about now for days. Now, before you join the march up the castle, to the Castle Frankenstein to capture the monster, I have a word of caution. They've come down with a sudden case of feverish morality, but what it really is nothing more than a political calculation by the Dems. Look, they have two paths to destroy the president. The first is the Mueller investigation. We've been talking about how that's corrupt to the core. Last night with Jeannie Rhee, yet another prosecutor who shouldn't be on this case, we broke that story exclusively last night on the show. The second way they're going to try to destroy the Trump presidency is the war on women. Yeah, that old saw. They have now determined that it's worth sacrificing Franken, just like they did John Conyers, throw him overboard to save the political Titanic that is their party. Now, one, what does this do? It sets the precedent for the Democrats to try to drive Roy Moore from office should he win the Alabama Senate race. And two, this is the next step in the quest to impeach President Trump. Now, the left is brilliant. They're really, really smart at using the media to create a narrative and pound it all day long that quickly becomes a political bludgeon. The drumbeat of accusations and the calls for scalps advance the false premise that the left are all about protecting women. In fact, both Hollywood and the Democrats, think about this. They've objectified and pornified and abused women for decades. And the abusers, let's not forget, have been celebrated. Ted Kennedy, Bill Clinton, Matt Lauer, Kevin Spacey, Franken, Conyers, Weinstein, the list goes on and on. So I'll tell you this tonight. Be wary of the lynch mob that you joined today, because tomorrow it could be coming for your husband, your brother, your son, and yes, even your president. And that's The Angle. Now, someone who knows Democrats and the games they play like this better than anyone, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, it's good to see you. Welcome back from Rome. Let's talk about the games that are being played up there on Capitol Hill. There's all this newfound moral outrage about Al Franken and all these Democrats and John Conyers. What's really going on here, fast-forwarding to 2018?
First of all, I'm going to be very politically incorrect. Let's go back to who Al Franken was a month ago. He had the #1 best-selling book. He was a very funny guy. Democrats loved him. He was doing fine. And then things began to fall apart. Now, all of these nice people, none of whom have given back the money that they raised from Harvey Wiseman, none of whom Weinstein, none of whom have repudiated Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, none of whom seemed offended in the past, suddenly in a paroxysm of moral outrage, create a lynch mob. And what you saw today was a lynch mob. Let's not have due process. Let's not ask anybody any questions. Let's not have any chance to have a hearing. Let's just lynch him. Because when we get done lynching him, we'll be so pure. We'll feel so good. This is a party which is losing its mind. I think, I'm being very politically incorrect, but let me just be clear. I think that the Gillibrands and others are literally losing their minds. I think that Elizabeth Warren is losing her mind. I think they're in this moment of existential enthusiasm, which in the middle of the Middle Ages we call flagellante. People would walk around, they'd beat themselves. They would beat themselves. They'd say, "Oh, I feel so much better now. I'm beating myself. Look how bad I am." These are people who grew up in a party which used to preach free love, which used to think that all of the hippiedom was wonderful, who used to think they somehow represent the future, and now they've suddenly curdled into this weird Puritanism, which feels a compulsion to go out and lynch people without a trial.
I just want everyone watching to understand that Newt Gingrich is here tonight, and he's standing up for Al Franken, okay? And I've got to tell you, I said last week that I didn't think he should resign because until, I think the voters have to have a say on this. The pushing people out of office.
Okay. No, I've not read all the detailed various allegations.
It gets too lurid.
To the best of my knowledge, even the one which broke today, which was the horrifying last straw, which led Schumer to decide, as a great New York Paul, that he had to suddenly stand on the side of Puritanism, which is actually by itself pretty bizarre. As I understand it, that occurred 2 years earlier when he was a comedian. So let me say again, politically incorrect. Al Franken was a comedian. Comedians often do weird things. He was in the entertainment business. He was doing the kind of things people in the entertainment business do. Now, I have not, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see anything that they've said he's done since he was a senator. I don't think they've said.
I've tried to lose track. I think there are a couple allegations of inappropriate conduct, but I think it's minor stuff.
I mean, but the point is, we're in one of those weird American moments when running around lynching people feels so good.
Yeah, it feels good to them.
I mean, if you go back and you go back and watch the YouTube of Clarence Thomas.
I was just going to say my old boss.
Yeah,
you know how he felt.
Who, by the way, was wonderful and swore in Callista.
Oh, great!
Great moment, and fellow Georgia and everything. But you go back and you look at what he said about an electronic lynching. And then you look at what we're saying. I mean, again, Conyers had a lot of good reasons to retire, but on the other hand, no hearings. No witness.
No, there's no due process. If you're accused and you're a man, you're accused, you're done.
This is Venezuela, Cuba. This is every third world banana republic.
But they're doing it because they want their power back. They have no substance. They have no issues. It's the war on woman redux for turning out the vote in 2018 and 2020.
I'm not even sure they're doing it for that reason.
Really? Oh, I do. I think it's get out the vote.
No,
I think that's all it's about.
I think they're doing it because they get together at a cocktail party, look at each other, and they go, "Oh my God, can you imagine?"
I know, because they want to hit Roy Moore, Newt, and they can't hit Roy Moore as long as Al Franken's sitting in the Senate. They can't go, "Oh, Donald Trump, you campaigned or you supported Roy Moore."
Let me ask an inappropriate question. What do we know about Doug Jones?
He's pro-abortion. That's what I know.
Yeah, he's pro-abortion. He's pro-gun control. He's left. But what if it turns out next Tuesday that Doug Jones actually had an inappropriate date when he was 11 years old, and it was really inappropriate, and he shouldn't even be on the ballot? Are the Democrats now going to jump up and go, vote for Roy Moore? I mean, we're in a cycle which, by any reasonable, I mean, this is cultural anthropology time. This is watch the natives go nuts.
Speaking of nuts, let's go right to the Mueller investigation.
Okay.
So they got all these prosecutors who I believe are politically compromised. One worked for the Clinton Foundation, Jeannie Reese. She represented Ben Rhodes, who was the Deputy National Security Advisor. We broke that last night. And then she is now working for Mueller, Andrew Weissman. He got the Peter Strzok, who was struck from the team. But what about this investigation? And is this now not all tainted because Mueller did not remove these people or assembled a team with a political, seemingly, at least on the surface, a political axe to grind against his president?
When they first appointed Mueller, I tweeted that I thought he was a very responsible person. And then I watched who he began to hire. And then I looked at his own law firm, which, by the way, gave
Wilmer Hale,
which I believe gave 99.18% of its money to Hillary.
That little? Mm.
Yeah, I mean, only 0.82 to Trump. I mean, and I began to look at all this stuff, and then I began to think about how they're doing this. Hillary's top aides clearly lied. Not a single indictment, not a single conviction.
Immunity, it looks like, for Cheryl Mills. So
Hillary is never put under oath, because you can't get them for perjury if they never swore. Okay? Now you get to, it's time to go after the Republicans. And I would say that, and I say this in all seriousness, I mean, I'm making fun about the Franken situation. If Hillary had not lost, we would be mired in the deepest level of corruption in American history. Mueller is corrupt. The senior FBI is corrupt. The system is corrupt. And until you get back up and say and realize how really, truly corrupt this is, I mean, there's a sickness here. My granddaughter Maggie got me to a fascinating book about murder in Osage County in the 1920s. And everybody in the county law enforcement was corrupt. And the people who came in, ironically, were the FBI, who were the honest outsiders. What you now have is the Osage County corruption at the level of Comey and Mueller and that entire system. And I mean, I think it is frightening. If you believe in the rule of law and you believe in America, what we are learning is genuinely frightening.
Finally, Jerusalem, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. There's all the elites in Europe are up in arms. Theresa May, Merkel, they're all going.
It's so lovely to know that anti-Semitism is alive and well in Europe. The fact is, the only country in the world which is not allowed to name its own capital is Israel. I think what Trump did today was courageous. I can also tell you, having talked with the Vice President this afternoon, this was systematic, it was thoughtful, it was strategic, and they believe it strengthens their hand in the end at getting to a peace agreement.
Newt Gingrich, it is always great to see you, and give my best to the ambassador. You're an ambassador's husband now, and you got double duty.
The State Department calls a trailing spouse.
Oh, a trailing, never trailing in our show. Great to see you, Newt. And next, two top Trump insiders, Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossy, join me with insights you're going to hear nowhere else. And Time Magazine's Person of the Year is just another excuse to bash the president. Come on. I'll explain in a continuing angle. Stay there. Steve Bannon makes no bones about it. He wants Mitch McConnell to go. And I asked Mitch McConnell about that last week, and he had some choice words, as you'll recall, and a lot of other establishment Republicans as well. Now, Bannon sees them as the biggest obstacle to passing the Trump agenda. So he's lining up anti-establishment Senate candidates like the embattled Roy Moore in Alabama. Now McConnell is fighting back. He's calling Bannon's preferred candidates a bunch of losers.
We're not going to lose any nominations to the kind of candidates that guy you were talking about endorsed. What he's a specialist in is nominating people who lose. This is the same element in the party that cost us a bunch of seats in 2010 and 2012. We changed our business model.
Well, to sort this all out, I'm joined now by the authors of a soon-to-be huge bestseller, I'm so excited, just published, insider account of The Campaign. I'm just going to call it The Campaign. The book is Let Trump Be Trump, the inside story of his rise to the presidency. We welcome former Trump presidential campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and deputy campaign manager Dave Bossy. Dave and Corey, congrats on the book. Love the blurbs on the back, by the way. They're awesome.
They
Love
are
them.
tremendous.
I'm just glad. I'm gonna rub this in Hannity's face that my blurb is before Hannity's. I love it. That's like little victories for me. I want to get into the book because it's fascinating. You get into the Trump personality, his management style or lack thereof. But on the way to that, I want to talk about this brewing fight between the establishment now and Bannon and the populists. Like, I'm a populist. You guys are pretty populist conservatives. This dovetails into so much of what you wrote about in your book. Who survives this fight? Is it the Bannon or the McConnell, or will it be a draw?
You know, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think they're going to coalesce around some of the same exact candidates. It's going to be very funny that Steve Bannon's going to be saying these are the conservative populists, and they are. And Mitch McConnell's going to be trying to take them for his own as establishment candidates. And we're going to see, we have a tremendous crop of candidates out there, whether it's Josh Mandel in Ohio, Josh Hawley in Missouri, all across the country. There's tremendous conservatives running for office. We're gonna pick up seats in November, and it's going to be because of this Trump agenda that we're so successful.
But Corey, isn't McConnell moving a little bit to Trump now? You heard him on chain migration. I interviewed him last week. I'd never heard him so conservative. He's like pushing chain migration for the RAISE Act. I mean, this is good. This is Trump.
The president is a force, and this is why he is always so successful. He brings people kicking and screaming to his side because he knows.
He brought you guys to your side.
He knows it's the right thing to do. And what Mitch McConnell knows is that the American people said, we're bringing Donald Trump to Washington for change. And the people that are going to run the 18th cycle, the Josh Mandel's of the world, and I've been out campaigning for Josh in full disclosure, he's going to come here to change the way Washington works.
The status quo doesn't want to change. They don't want it changed.
You can be left behind.
And well, that's one of the reasons why this president has been frustrated over this last 10 or 11 months.
He gets a little impatient, don't you think, sometimes?
Because he's used to getting things done. He's a New York entrepreneur who says, if you don't get things done, you die, you go away, you fail. Well, guess what? He came to Washington, he wanted to kick in a couple of doors and knock over a couple of desks because Washington is broken. And we, in our campaign and in the book, we detail his passion and what he did to the American people. You were there last year when we were at the rallies at late at night, at midnight, every night, night after night.
I want to talk about the moment that you learned you were not going to be working on the campaign anymore, Corey, because I've been there when I've been fired, and it's not fun. You poured your heart and soul into that campaign. I remember being with you. I think it was in February of 2016. Trump was just, people were hammering him day in and day out. It was at Mar-a-Lago. I think I was there for Palm Beach Republican Club. And the campaign was you and Hope Hicks. I kept saying, where's the campaign? I was like, they said, well, the campaign's up on the second floor somewhere. I'm thinking there's going to be a big war room. I open all these doors. Then I see this tiny office. There's two people working away at the computers. I'm like, who are you? Oh, Corey, where's the campaign? And that was it. So you were putting your heart and soul into this. And then Manafort comes in and it's like,
but look, even at that time, the campaign, if it was three people, Donald Trump, Corey Lewandowski, and Hope Hicks, it was two people too many. This whole campaign was Donald Trump. 99.99%. And look, the rest of us had a very small role. This was him, his gut, his instinct, his tenacity, his dedication. He outworked every opponent in the primary, every person in that general election. He just outworked in the staff. And so, look, did I have a little bit of a role? I had a front row seat of history. But it could have been me or somebody else. You let Trump be Trump, and he's going to be successful.
They were trying to get you for pushing that gal, Michelle.
Laura, they all want.
Everybody was a target. Everyone was a target, but it was kind of fun, wasn't it? I mean, honestly.
The media hated Trump, so that was the narrative they wanted.
The night of the election. Let's go back to the night of the election because, the night before, when we were in Virginia, he actually said we're going to win it. To me, he said we're going to win it. But that night of the election.
It didn't look so good.
He was like, it was fun. You write in your book, well, this was kind of fun, guys. We had fun doing this, didn't we? And then the numbers started coming in. That is so cool.
The early exit polls that we saw at 5 o'clock were just abysmal.
The left was exuberant.
They were, and Hillary's, they're popping champagne corks. We had to suffer through the entire night. It's all in the book, Let Trump Be Trump. The behind the scenes of election night, of the debate prep, it's phenomenal.
Now, when you first met Donald Trump, very quickly,
I met Donald Trump in 2010. Steve Wynn, my friend, was helping me raise money for Children's Hospital here in Washington, D.C. For my son's heart surgeries and brain surgeries. And it was a tremendous outpouring by Donald Trump to me as just no fanfare, no press. He just is a kind, gentle guy.
And we don't see enough of that.
That's why we wrote about it in the book. We wanted people to understand the softer side of Donald Trump.
When he wasn't throwing stuff, I'm not just.
No.
And I've known him for a while.
But I introduced him to Corey.
So gracious, so magnanimous, and look, I spent so much time with him away from my family. He always was concerned about them and made sure that they were taken care of, and that's not what most people do.
They're going to impeach him? They're going to try to impeach him, get him out of office, successful not?
It is a joke, and we're going to win. We're going to win in November, and we're going to have a great year legislatively, and that'll help us in November.
Now, Corey and Dave, I want you to stand by because former Defense Secretary Don Rumsfeld, who is a fan of this president, is about to come on. Join me exclusively. We're going to talk about Bush's criticism of him and the president's moves today in the Middle East. Thank you both for joining. We love the book. Fantastic. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Stay right there.
I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering.
Clinton promised to do it. Bush promised to do it. Obama promised to do it. Trump actually did it. And it took a lot of guts to make this move. Much of the Islamic world is warning of severe unrest, and some are even calling for bloodshed in retaliation for that move, just as the administration tries to revive the Mideast peace process. Who better to tell us what this all means than former Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld? He's the author of a new memoir of his time in the Ford administration called When the Center Held, Gerald Ford and the Rescue of the American Presidency. Mr. Secretary, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for stopping by tonight. I want to start with the big news of the day, the president's decision to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. Why is everybody so upset about the timing, given the fact that this has basically been on the books since 1995 with a huge bipartisan support? Most presidents, all the presidents I can think of, said that they were going to do it, and they didn't.
Well, I guess the reason it's an issue is because there are countries around the world that would prefer that it had not been done. It's a no-brainer. It's the right thing to do. President Trump made the right decision. He stepped up and did it. It's inevitable that there'll be some criticism about it, but I just can't imagine any country in the world that doesn't believe that they have the right to have their capital where they want it.
Here's some of the criticism that you mentioned. Put up the full screen. Egypt says it would complicate Middle East matters. Jordan says potentially dangerous repercussions. Palestinians say dangerous consequences. Saudi Arabia, our ally in the region, detrimental to the peace process. Turkey says it threatens to sever its ties with Israel. So the pressure being ramped up both in the Middle East and in elite circles here in Washington.
And in Europe.
And in Europe. Merkel says it's bad. Theresa May says it's bad. The Pope weighed in saying we should keep the status quo. Is President Trump out there the man alone on this?
No, there are a lot of people who recognize that it's a rational thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, in my view. And I think most of those countries will get over it. I think they probably have constituencies that feel that they don't want Israel to be a part of that world. And the vast majority of the people in the world feel differently. They do agree that Israel has a right to exist and that it should be a part of that region, and that countries are inevitably going to decide where they want their capital.
Well, the point is they think that Trump is losing the bargaining chip. And to that I said, well, we've been trying that with the bargaining chip, and it hasn't really gone that well.
No, I agree. I think it's not surprising to me that all the countries you mentioned have an understandable need to vent modestly, but it'll go away.
What about if something happens, more terrorism, attacks on embassies? Do you see a blowback on President Trump? Like, you provoked this, you pushed this, you pushed it when you didn't need to, you're a wrecking ball, Mr. Chaos. That's the line from the American media, many in the American media today, that this is just more Trump chaos.
Well, I don't see it that way at all. It seems to me that the president made the right decision. He stepped up and did it. It's inevitable that there'll be people who don't like it and will make noise about it. But the idea that it would lead to a stream of terrorism, I just don't see that at all.
I had Bill Richardson on the show last night, former UN ambassador, and he says he goes all over Europe and he hears very interesting things about the president. Let's watch.
I go overseas all the time. You know what they ask me, Laura? They say, why is President Trump leaving
growing the
American
economy?
Why is he negative on the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Because it kills American jobs.
Why does he want to pull out of NATO? Internationally, I travel all the time.
Bill,
we are getting
the European elites
criticized by everybody.
The president's not popular, Mr. Secretary. He's not a popular leader. And Obama was the rock star. Clinton was the rock star. And now we have this guy Trump and Richardson and company, the elites here. It's ruining our image around the world.
Well, that's just not true. The idea that the behavior or the conduct or the decisions or the positions being taken by the President of the United States are ruining our image around the world, I think is a massive overstatement. The reality is that the American people made a conscious decision to put in the presidency of the United States someone who had never served in government, military or civilian. I would have to search through history to see if there's ever been a president who had never served in government. Now, why did they do that? They did that because they wanted someone who'd never served in government. And that's what we've got. He does not behave like an establishment politician. And that is hard for establishment politicians and establishment media to accept, because it's not the normal behavior of a seasoned politician who's the president.
Is part of it that these elites, both in media and in politics, were so taken off guard and so embarrassed by the win of Trump? Because he took them on personally, he took them on substantively, he shattered all the perceptions of how you have to run a campaign. They were all left flat-footed.
Yeah, and no one thought he'd win also. I mean, that's embarrassing. But the American people decided they wanted to roll the dice and put someone in that office who came from a different approach, with a different approach, and they got one. And I was with a very active Democrat today, a wonderful classmate of mine from school, and very much a Democrat. And I said, well, what do you think about all this? He said, well, he hasn't done anything wrong. And he hasn't. He said, what do you think? And I said, well, the most important job of a senior executive is picking good people. And he has picked excellent people. The Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, the Vice President Mattis at Defense, his cabinet is as good a cabinet as any one of the 2 or 3 I served in. And it seems to me that he's picking very good people, sensible, sound, thoughtful people.
Parallels between the treatment of Reagan and the treatment of Trump in the media and by the elites, especially the European elites. I was in college, but I remember Ronnie Reagan and he's going to blow up the world, the no nukes movement. It was a big push against Reagan. He was going to blow up the world.
Exactly. And he was, the society, the elites in the society were dismissive of Reagan and didn't believe a movie actor and Bedtime with Bonzo could do the job. And he got in there, and that wonderful, warm, sensible approach that he brought to governance won over an awful lot of people in our country, and he did a fine job.
Well, the elites never accepted him until he was long gone. Now suddenly Reagan's their hero, but they didn't like him much when he was in there. Former President George W. Bush recently said Don Rumsfeld didn't make one blanking decision during his presidency. Stay there for Rumsfeld's reaction.